We have what appears to be two very different readings in the letter to the Corinthians and in the gospel today. Paul talks about love in that beloved poetic passage, and the gospel seems to be about rage and hate as Jesus' townspeople go to throw him out. But there is a unifying message and point in these, because both of these stories are situations in which there is a narrow vision, a tunnel vision that is afflicting the people. Look first at the story with Jesus in his hometown. Jesus has just read from the prophet Isaiah the passage that declares God's favor coming upon his people at last, that there will be healing and renewal and freedom. And as he reads this, he looks out and says, today this scripture is fulfilled as you hear me read it. And as we just heard, the people hear this amazing, gracious message, and then they say, but not you. You're Joseph's son. It doesn't fit our vision of the great prophet who's coming, the great Messiah who's coming to declare this. It can't be you. And then Jesus seems to throw gas on the fire by saying that, well, actually, with the favor of God that's coming into the world, it's not just for you. You know, in your vision, you can't see it, but it moves outside of the people of Israel. Look at Elijah when he went not to the widows of Israel, but to this foreign woman up in Sidon. And look at Elisha, who healed none of the lepers of Israel, but rather, who came to him in faith? Naaman, the general of the Syrian army, an enemy. And they're enraged. They're God's chosen people. They're the people upon God, who God's favor is going to come to, and they're outraged by this thought, and they just can't receive it. And they throw him out. But what he talked about has come to pass. It's not many years later that St. Paul, a Jew, is in the Greek city of Corinth. And he's here in a church of Gentiles, of the non-Jews, who were outside of the covenant, but now the covenant has come out to them. And they are experiencing the favor of God and the presence of God and the working of God. They are exercising exciting gifts of ministry. And Paul was talking about some of them in the chapter right before this, chapter 13, the hymn to love. And he starts out mentioning them again. And he's not saying they're not real. He's not saying this is counterfeit. He's saying there are gifts of tongues where you speak with, you're given the ability to speak with human language or prayer languages of the angels in your worship. And some of you have exercising the gift of prophecy. The very heart and mind of God is given to you so that you can give it to the people. And some of you are exercising great acts of service and generosity and giving away what you have. And some have even died for their faith. But there's a problem, because as the Corinthian church is getting all caught up in all of this excitement and energy and power and presence of God, Paul says, all these things you're doing without love are nothing to God. It's just a lot of noise. It's like banging pots and pans. It's not beautiful without love. Because they were losing perspective. He's trying to open their eyes to see what it's all about, this movement of God's Spirit. It's not about puffing them up. He talked about that earlier. It's not about how great you are because you have this ministry, how great you are because you can accomplish this and do this and that, and look at you, they don't have it. They were kind of these super Christians. And Paul's saying, no, no, no. Open up and understand what all of this exists for. It's the movement of God's love. And you know, you get together with a bunch of Episcopal clergy and talk about how you can kind of see how smart they are and clever and sophisticated, and they're not Bible thumpers, and you walk away from the meeting and you don't really feel like you were loved. And think about this, church. You know, as we come and we do our activities, we offer our gifts, we sing our praises, we work hard, we welcome the homeless, we are people on vestry to take care of the property, we have teaching ministries, very active here. Do you ever find yourself becoming irritated while you do some of these things? Impatient? Annoyed with them? Ever insist on your own way? Literally it says seeking after itself. Love does not seek after itself. Paul gives us this poem of love, not because there's anything romantic about it, but I'm so glad that so many couples want it in their wedding, because it isn't romantic at all. It's real. Love is patient. You have to be humble to be patient. You have to get yourself out of the way to be patient. Love is kind. And after stating it positively and in such simple, humble ways, it's not flashy. Then he says it isn't boastful, rude, envious, keeping a list of the wrongs and remembering what people did against you. And I think an application here for us is to take that wonderful poem about love and take it home this week and look at it every day. It's kind of a good warm-up for Lent because it humbles me. And I look and I see myself against that. And Paul's bringing them down. He's trying to open them up and yet bring them down, if that makes sense. Bringing them down to a better place. If you don't have love, the rest just doesn't matter, no matter how flashy or powerful it seems to be to everybody else. You gain nothing with God. Nothing for God's work and life and kingdom. But then, having tried to open our eyes and humble us, Paul doesn't stop there, but he wants to encourage. So he says some interesting things. He says, right now the way we see things is partial. Our knowledge is partial. We see through a mirror dimly. He was talking about polished metal mirrors that don't give a good reflection. He says, with us right now, that's about as good as it gets. It's not clear. Our love isn't where we want it to be. And then he talks about what it's like to be a child. And when I was a child, I thought like a child, I spoke like a child, I reasoned like a child. And he's reminding me of something. You know, when I was about 10 years old, I just couldn't wait till I was a teenager. That would be so wonderful and powerful and great. And then when I was about 13, I couldn't wait till I was maybe 18 and in college and off into the world. And then I couldn't wait till I was 21. And then I couldn't wait till like my life was kind of coming together with a career and what was going to be happening with me. And then you go along for a while, and then you start to look back and say, could I go back? And then people tell me about what happened to the golden years. My mind's falling apart, my body's falling apart. Because we don't arrive here. It's only partial here. Now we see through a mirror dimly. We are like children. And Paul's saying that to encourage us, because he's saying, you are children. You are growing. It is ahead of you. And unlike our physical lives that I just talked about, there is a life waiting for you when we will see face to face. When we will be fully known, and we will fully know. We will be complete. We will be mature. We will be who we are called to be in God. But not now. Then. And he goes on to get there. Because after this chapter, he finishes teaching about gifts and ministries in chapter 14. Then he talks about resurrection. And he says, you know what you're like? You can't even imagine, because it's like a seed. You are like a seed that is planted in the ground, and it's full of potential and life. And yet, it's this encapsulated thing into the ground, and it dies. And then what comes out is an unimaginable, changed life. And we will be changed, he says, in a moment. Then. And so he says, hold on to that. Now, when we struggle to love, when we find our world is so painful and difficult and broken, to abide in faith, he says. Hope and love. Faith. Trusting God is coming among us, working in we who are so impartial, who see so dimly. God is come among us. Faith. Trust that. Trust that it is going somewhere. That's why we have hope. Because it is not a dead end. There is light, glory at the end of the tunnel. Faith, hope. And then he says, after chapter 13 ends, he starts chapter 14, make love your aim. Aim. You're not there yet. Make love your aim. In everything you do. With patience. With kindness. Not seeking after yourself. Hoping and bearing. Enduring and believing.